Hello, Savannah, on this great Wednesday afternoon. You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am so glad and blessed to be here. My weekly opportunity here to talk for a whole hour at you about real estate. You are listening to Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer. And in my show, we introduce and explore the world of real estate in all aspects, to include my personal interest and expertise, real estate investing. So I'm really happy to be here. And today, I have a very special treat for you all, so bear with me here. It's actually a very, very special show. And why do you think it's special? Well, let me share it with you. So for starters, we are actually broadcasting live here today from the studio in downtown of beautiful and gorgeous Savannah. This is my very first live show, so bear with me. So I'll stumble along on the controls. I'm actually on the board. And I have in the studio with me a very special guest. And she is also a real estate investor and has graciously agreed to join me here on my very live show. So we'll have some lively conversations, some talk, some entertainment, and hopefully some great information for you. Now, by the way, before I go any further, my email address is realestate@juliamspencer.com. M stands for money. Make sure you send me messages. I want to hear about you. I want to know what you are listening to and what kinds of questions you have in any of my topics that I discuss. And let's get right to it. So Mary, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Julia. I'm so happy to be here. Like you said, I am a real estate investor, but I'm new to Savannah. This is a beautiful place to be. I'm so happy to be here. I was talking to my parents the other night. I'm from Missouri, and it was pretty darn cold in Missouri, so I was real happy to be here where the sun was shining and life is sunny and happy still this time of year and not cold and dreary. That's for sure.
That's great. So what brought you here to Savannah? Why did you come here other than the weather? Of course, you have you're a real estate investor where you're from, and you said you have several properties back in Missouri still as well.
I do, and when I decided to leave Missouri, I hired a professional property management team to take care of that for me. I didn't think that I would be real good at doing that several states away, but the reason that we're here is my life partner and I. He had the opportunity to get a job here in Savannah. He had never been here before. Several years ago, I was here and fell in love with the place and always wanted to find some way to get back here. And so when he was given the opportunity to get a job, we came in last April, and he interviewed and was offered the position. And so that's why we're here. It took us a little while to get here. We had lots of things to do. But we finally made it. We've been here for a couple months, and we're really enjoying it. The people here are so nice and friendly. The pace has slowed down some compared to where we were, which is probably a good thing for us. We were extremely active and busy, probably a little bit too much. So we're just enjoying the pace and the people and the hospitality and the food and the beach. And I mean, there's nothing bad here that I can see.
Well, I certainly agree, and that's kind of like the reason why I came here. And in fact, I've noticed that a lot of people that come to Savannah, they come here to visit at first, and then they got to thinking, it's like, oh well, Savannah, fall in love with it and keep coming back and make the decision to come live here permanently eventually. Actually, it's the same thing that happened to me as well. I lived in Macon, and we came to Tybee Island actually to go to the beach because it's the closest beach to Macon where I lived at the time. And so let's have a little drive on a Friday afternoon and spend the weekend at the beach. And eventually we decided, let's try to see if we can make a living out here in Savannah. And here I am 9 years later, still here.
Yeah, I think it's just a wonderful place to be, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Mary and I actually met about a week and a half ago. We actually just met because Mary found me on the on the crazy interwebs out there and saw some of my YouTube videos, I guess.
I did.
And I believe the reason that you contacted me is to learn about tax sale investing primarily, or was it?
Yes, that is correct. I have a few years experience in doing real estate. There's so many opportunities in real estate. And I know when I first started looking into real estate, it was almost like eating an elephant. It's overwhelming. There's so many different ways to make money in real estate and so many different things to invest in and ways to invest. So it took me a little while to kind of decide what my business model was going to be, what I was going to do. Because, you know, if you try and do it all initially, you get you're just paralyzed by, you know, too much stuff. So tax lien foreclosures is one of the things I've always been interested in, although the state that I'm from really wasn't the best place to try and do that. The time to wait for someone to be able to come and reclaim their property was too long, in my opinion. I didn't want my money tied up that long. I couldn't do anything with the property in the meantime and different things like that. So I kind of put it on the back burner. Mm-hmm. So when I came to Savannah, I was trying to decide, you know, what am I going to do? My life partner, he works 7 days on and 7 days off. And I thought, well, you know, I have my properties in Missouri. Maybe I'll just get a part-time job, but I don't know how I'm going to get one with that schedule, because obviously when he's off, we have things we want to do. I don't want to be working while he's at home. So I thought, well, I'll just look into the real estate market here. It's a different market than where I'm from. And so I started looking around on the internet and trying to see what was available, who was here, trying to find someone that I thought I would like to connect with. And so when I found that, actually first I was referred to this radio station by someone I met. And when I got on the website to check out the station, that's when I found out that was your very first show. So
yes, just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, just a couple weeks ago. So I thought, okay, well, you know, obviously she knows what she's doing or she wouldn't be on the radio. So I'm going to check this girl out and see what's up. And so I did do that. I did do a lot of research. I went to I watched a lot of your YouTube stuff, kind of got your background, felt like, you know, that you were very well versed in what you were doing, that you knew what you were doing. And I just really wanted to meet you. I just thought that you'd be a great person to meet and make a contact with and you know, see if, you know, where our friendship would take us and what we could do to help each other. So
yes,
that's,
sure.
and I did buy your ebook, your tax lien foreclosure ebook, which is very, very good.
Awesome.
As well.
Awesome.
So.
Well, and when we did actually talk, we actually met at a Starbucks here in Thunderbolt. And we talked for 2 hours, not just about tax sale foreclosure investing, which is one of the things that I actually do very much interested in and also have a lot of expertise in. But we also talked about all kinds of other real estate topics. And in fact, what I thought was really cool is when you came, you actually sent me, prior to that, you sent me an email with all these questions. And as I was talking to you, I was like, wow, we should bring some of, not just the questions, but the answers to the greater Savannah community, kind of educate people about some of the things that we know. And together, of course, it's like 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals 3, because we're talking shop here, real estate investors. We sit down and it just goes off, you know, 2-3 hours are gone in the flash of the wind, and we're just talking and talking. And I think all of that information is very useful for maybe some other people that want to get into real estate investing, or maybe even own real estate in this town already and just need more information. And by the way, I wanted to just add real quick, tax sale foreclosure investing is a topic that I am very interested in. I'm also, I guess I claim to be an expert on it, certainly not an expert like some other people, but I do have a few mentors that I work with that have been doing it since the 80s, so they have much more experience than I do. But I have the direct link, so, but what it is, just very briefly for you, if you're listening and you've never heard of this, every single state in the United States levies taxes on real estate. And so a lot of times there's escrow accounts, mortgage companies collect for this money to pay the taxes from the homeowners. If you have a mortgage, or if you don't have a mortgage, you are responsible as a homeowner to pay taxes. And if you don't pay them and enough time goes by and the due process, legal process has been followed, the counties, municipalities, cities, whoever is levying the taxes then has authority, of course, following specific rules and regulations of the state and federal laws as well, to auction these properties off at courthouse steps or inside any courtrooms, depending on which state. And there's so many different nuances and regulations that are different for every area. And that's kind of what I do. I find these properties, mostly abandoned properties, that have passed down from generation to generation and just were just abandoned. And I pick them up, and sometimes we fix them, sometimes we continue selling them. And we actually had that discussion, Mary, right?
We did.
You said something about one thing that you should never do is leave real estate to your children. Can you talk a little bit about that? Or
Yes, and the reason why I say that is because in the past, that's the way I have purchased a lot of properties. Typically, and I was sharing with this with you when we met the first time, Julia, was that my house that I bought personally before I left Missouri, I was watching this property. It was in this wonderful neighborhood. It was vacant. I didn't know the history behind it. Unfortunately, the person that had it listed had it way overpriced, and so she wasn't getting any leads. She wasn't showing it. Nothing was happening with the property, and I kept watching it and thought. And so, initially, I'm thinking, okay, well, what's wrong with this property? It's such a great property. It's in this neighborhood where properties, fly off the market, but this one's sitting there. I didn't know what the problem was. And so finally I thought, you know what, Mary, you're in real estate. Call them up and just make them offer. See what's going on. Start something. See what's going on with this property.
Yeah.
So,
proactive.
yeah. So I made an offer, which I thought was pretty low, and they took it. And I was like, wow, what is happening here? Long story short, the lady who lived there had passed away, left it to her daughters. Her daughters live in Hawaii.
Yes, far away. You told
There
me
was
that.
a mortgage on the property. So they inherited the house, which means they inherited the mortgage,
the taxes,
the insurance,
the
mowing bill, the
everything.
utility bill.
Yes.
These two girls had no intention of ever coming to Missouri to deal with this property. They didn't want it. So basically they dumped it for the offer that I made because they wanted to get rid of it. So I know that sometimes people think, well, I want to leave this to my children, Sometimes you're not doing them a favor by leaving them property, especially if it's not in an area where they can manage it or take care of it. If they don't have the financial means to take care of it, if it is in state of repair and they don't have the money, then what happens is you have someone like me who will come along and, buy it at a discount because the children just want to be rid of it. It's a burden to them. And I've bought several properties this way where someone thinks, oh, I'm going to leave them the family house. Okay, well, the truth of the matter is once your children move on and have, get married and have their own families, now they have their family house established. And, maybe once in a while someone wants their, their old childhood home, but my experience is most people don't. And they don't want the burden. They don't want the financial responsibility. Now it causes stress in their life, that maybe they're not sure what to do with it. How do they get rid of it? In today's market, if a property isn't in good condition, if it's in need of repair, needs paint, isn't updated, those type of things, sometimes they're difficult to sell on the retail market. We've kind of been taught that, houses now need to be updated. They need to be modern. They need to be staged. All these things you're supposed to do to sell your house on the retail market. And a lot of times when people inherit these properties, they don't have the means or the want to or whatever to do all that stuff. So for me, I told my children, I said, I'm not going to leave you any stuff because stuff can be a burden. I'll just leave information that when something happens to me, everything's supposed to be sold and liquidated and you can have the cash. That's basically what they want anyway. So just my experience is when you leave properties to children, unless you leave enough money to for them to actually manage it or take care of it, it can be a stressful situation for them.
Yes,
for sure.
I agree. And actually shared a story about that too. When I was in Macon and I started tax sale foreclosure investing in Macon, I ran across a couple of properties. This was years ago, probably maybe like 10 years ago. And I purchased a few properties. I think they were not that great of a neighborhoods, but they were decent properties for somebody to go in and just kind of fix them up, maybe flip them or live there themselves. They were very close to Mercer University. Of course, Mercer University in the last couple of years, I'm kind of a little biased because I graduated from Mercer. Here I'm an alumni. But anyway, Mercer University in the city of Macon has grown phenomenally. I mean, they have built a whole village around their college, actually, and my properties were just right next to it in the bad part of the neighborhood, and maybe in the future, they'll encompass more areas right around the college. But my property at that time was still outside the bounds of the nice area. But anyways, I purchased several of those properties, and I think I shared with you that the owner had passed away. It's a lot of times it's the same situation. The owners pass away, so and I get a lot of criticism about this, about tax sale foreclosure investing. They tell me I'm this hawk, and I've actually had a lawyer tell me one time, it's like, you're like the scum of the earth. I mean, you're like the bottom feeder. This is what a lawyer told me. And I keep telling people, it's like, I don't buy homesteads. I don't buy properties where the owner lives in the property. Maybe if it's a tenant, then you can tell that by looking at the property cards. But for the most part, the properties I buy have already been abandoned, have been vacant for a long time. But anyway, I'm getting distracted here. I'll get back to the story. So the owner had died, and they had 40, and that's 40 properties in Macon, and they were all over Macon. And 2/3 of them were in such bad repair and such bad shape that it would have cost a phenomenal amount of money just to get them to a level where they could be rentable, where housing inspector wouldn't just shut the operation down. 1/3 of it was rented, and they had tenants, but the rest of them were just they were just crappy properties. You can't do anything with them. And I bought some of those from that 2/3 pile. The kids all had businesses in town, restaurant business, one of them. Another one had like a breakfast bar type thing. And they were just not interested. I mean, they just declined their inheritance and walked away. And these properties were sitting in no man's land. And it's kind of hard for a lot of people to comprehend that you can actually still, in the United States, and right here in Georgia, right here in front of our doorstep, you can still go out and get properties for $1,000. I've bought one for $800. I bought one right here in this city for $1,400, which I've made into an Airbnb rental or a SCAD rental with very little effort to fix it up. And these are not properties were taken away from people. These are properties that are just vacant. And in the county and the city, the ones that are collecting taxes are very, very happy to find somebody that takes them on, pays the taxes, fixes them up, makes the neighborhoods good again. Have you had any experience with any of that?
Yes, and I've had people say that to me. They say, and another part of my business is I help people facing foreclosures and things like that, which can be a whole nother topic some other day. But I've had people say, golly, how do you sleep at night? I mean, you're just stealing these properties. Okay, no, I'm not. Number one, they've already been, abandoned. They're a burden to someone. If they're not taken care of and they're run down, it pulls the neighborhood down. And so basically I've gone in and bought properties before where the neighbor has come over. I bought a property in Missouri that had been abandoned for several years, in very, very bad shape. The rest of the neighborhood was in good shape. It was older homes, but everyone had, it was mostly owner occupied, and so they had fixed them up. But you have this one on the corner that's just an eyesore to the neighborhood. Well, when we bought it, we went in, completely rehabbed it, made it like brand new, fixed it all up. So what did that do think of all the good that brought. That brought up the neighborhood. That got rid of that property that was an eyesore in the neighborhood, and we made it good. We have a nice family in there who wanted to be in that area, but obviously couldn't buy the property, didn't have the money to fix it up themselves. We fixed up the yard. The city, it was kind of an abandoned property, and the city was having to pay to mow and all that, which means the taxpayers were paying for it to be mowed. So everything that I do and everything that's in my business model, everybody has to win, or I don't do it. And so when you look at that, and if you look at what happened in about 2008, when we had this like crash in the real estate market and people were losing their homes and all that, maybe through no fault of their own, maybe they lost their job, whatever happened, that pulled the whole neighborhood value down. If you had 3 or 4 foreclosures in your neighborhood and then you tried to sell your property, they would use those as comps. Well, you've had these foreclosures. Now your property value's gone down. And so I try to make sure that whatever I do in the real estate world benefits everybody involved, even including the neighborhood.
That's a really good way of looking at it, and I try to do it the same way. So I agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. Now you said something about your business model, and I guess we'll talk about that after our break.
Okay.
And I just wanted to let you know, since you're listening, that if as a business you enjoy our programming on WRUULP, please support the station with a donation. Let your customers, neighbors, and friends know that you share our vision of building a thriving community based on diverse, vibrant radio programming. As business partner, our listeners will know you support Savannah's only broad-based community radio station. Become a tower sponsor or underwriter. To check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/business. Again, to check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/business. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUULP, and we will be right back after the song.
Most things in life now are based on credit scores. You know, how much you pay for your insurance, whether or not you can get a home mortgage, sometimes whether or not you can get a job. I mean, it's such a big part of who we are anymore. So what can happen, let's say, for instance, maybe you've recently changed jobs. Maybe you've recently been divorced. Maybe you're just new to town and have just started a new job. There's so many things that can affect your credit and keep you from getting a mortgage. So what that involves with what I can do is that as I purchase properties and have them available on the market, then for someone who has a job, can prove their income with, tax returns or a current W-2 or whatever, and makes enough income that they can make the payment on the property, we can go ahead and put them in that property, get them set up with a great company who will help them with their credit, and then they will be able to cash out at some point in time. So basically that's how that works. And, it's not it's not like rental. I mean, you're actually, you have ownership of the property. With a certain amount of time it's a lease purchase option. And so what we do is when someone wants to go into the program, we sit down and visit with them, find out how much time they need, because the last thing we want is for someone to fail. I work with other investors. They don't want their properties back. Their goal is to help people become homeowners and to be able to eventually get a loan and cash them out of that property, and so they can take that money and buy another property and help someone else. So that's kind of in a nutshell how it works. Of course, there's more to it than that, but that will give you an idea of what my business model is and the things that I like to do to try and help people. And the reason why I chose that business model is because you can do all kinds of research, and it will tell you that people that own their properties are happier. Their children are happier. They have stronger marriages. They're more involved with the community. I mean, who doesn't want to own their own home in America?
Yes.
It's
the American dream.
It is the American dream. And sometimes people just need a little bit of help to get there. And so that's one of the things that I enjoy doing is helping people become, owners of a home.
And you're correct, especially when you had mentioned about mortgages and how difficult it is these days to get mortgages, especially after our last mortgage crash. I think you said 2008 or so.
Yeah.
I myself, self-employed real estate investor, I actually have a difficult time getting a mortgage because what they want to see is a W-2. I don't have a W-2. then they want to see a tax return. And it's like, okay, I have tons of income, but I also have tons of expenses. But as a real estate investor, and this is something I mentioned on my last show, we have a lot of non-cash expenses.
Yes.
I call them paper expenses. They're not actual money outflow from your pocket, but they are deductions on your tax return. And that would be depreciation. That's kind of like the biggest one, as well as interest. If you have mortgages and you have tenants living there, you can deduct the interest on your mortgages, but you're not actually paying for that because your tenants are paying for that with their rent.
Correct.
So once you add all of that up, and if you have tons of properties, I mean, your tax return pretty much can look at the end of the bottom line as if you've not made a whole lot at all, or sometimes nothing at all, depending.
Right.
And you show that to a bank, hey, give me a mortgage. It's like, well, you have zero income. You can't get a loan.
That's true. And that's, and it's interesting because a lot of people I work with are self-employed. And so it's a catch-22. Being self-employed is a great way to go. I've been self-employed for, most of my life. And so in order to, there's lots of tax advantages for self-employed people. And of course, you want to take advantage of all of those as much as you can. But like you said, when you do that, then it also oftentimes makes your bottom line look way smaller than it is. So, that was something that we always struggled with. 30 some years, we owned a heating and air conditioning company. And so we would have to plan ahead. And basically what we would do, we would have to cheat ourselves. We would have to not take all the deductions we could if we were going to need to do capital improvements like in a year, then we wouldn't take all our deductions. So we would show more income, which cost us more in taxes so we could get a loan. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about it.
You're sitting in that little dichotomy of what should I do? How much should I declare? You know?
are. And I have a friend of mine, she was self-employed and she was wanting to buy a house. And so she had to plan for a year in advance. And so she didn't take all the deductions so that she could show that her income was closer to what it really was, but it cost her an extra $18,000 in taxes that year. So she could qualify for a mortgage.
Yes.
So like I said, there's all kinds of things that affect people, that affect their credit, that will affect the way you can get a mortgage. And so this is a way you can become a homeowner and own that property and enjoy home ownership and then cash it out at some point in time.
So essentially, what I'm gathering is you put out the word to have distressed homeowners, for example, contact you that may be behind on their mortgage or maybe just want to get out of their house and have a hard time selling it, maybe because they have no equity, or just period don't want to deal with it, or maybe they're even, I don't know, even if they're upside down a little bit. I don't know if you...
Sometimes I can do that, yes. Like, for instance, I bought a house in Missouri. This gentleman was there. He had only owned it for 2 years, so there wasn't a lot of equity. He wanted to move back to Oregon. He knew that if he put it on the market, that he would come to closing with money, because by the time he sold it on the retail market, paid realtor commission and all that, and he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to come to the table with a check. So he called me. I went in. We have a program that we can go ahead and purchase the property, and he was able to move on, very quickly. I mean, within 2 weeks, he was in Oregon, and he was happy, and I had possession of the property and put a tenant buyer in there. And so it has to be, like I said, everybody has to win. He got what he needed. I was able to get a property at a good value where I could put a tenant buyer in there. So, I was able to get a property that worked for me. He was able to move on with what he wanted to do. And now I have a tenant buyer in there who's able to enjoy home ownership. So it like I said, it has to work for everybody.
Yes, exactly. And in the process of how you do that, obviously you had to study that and to learn that.
Oh, yeah.
And you are you planning to continue that model here in Savannah? As you said, you've done this in Missouri, but you're still looking to do that here, or?
I am. I'm open to it here, for sure. I have a little different mindset here because the state works differently than Missouri. So I'm real excited to go with you to this next tax lien foreclosure.
We talked about that.
Because that is such a win for everybody. The more tax money that the state or county collects, the better services and stuff they can provide for their county and their community. So if they have this huge tax debt that they haven't collected, then that all works into their budget and gives them less money to actually provide goods and services to the people who live there. So I'm excited to see, how this works in Savannah, to go that route. But yes, I'm open to looking, people that might be in a distressed situation that's very stressful. And if I can help them, I'm happy to do that. I just offer people, I just tell people, this is what I can offer. If it works for you, that's great. And if it doesn't, it was nice to meet you, and I wish them all the best. I mean, I wish I could help everybody and make everybody's life wonderful, but that's just not reality. Some people I can help and some I can't, but I always give it my best shot to try and make it good for everybody.
Well, it sounds like a win-win as long as everybody knows what's going on and
oh yeah,
you can get somebody to leave. And also the people that are selling their distressed properties to you actually are able to requalify for another mortgage down the line a little bit.
Yes.
Because
yes.
there's not going to be any adverse action done on
Right.
the property in terms of foreclosure or anything like that. So that helps them out a lot.
Right. I've bought several properties in Missouri that way where people, through no fault of their own, one of them lost their job. She was single, lost her job, could no longer make her mortgage payment, because of, the company left. They moved to another state. So, it wasn't like she did anything wrong. It's like the company closed the doors and moved. So, she got behind on her payments and was looking at foreclosure. So, like I said, the program that I could offer her, she liked that program. We went ahead and did that for her. She moved on, and so she doesn't have a foreclosure on her record, which is huge. I mean, nobody wants a foreclosure on their record. It really can hurt your credit for quite some time. It's difficult to get over. It just takes time. So if anyone's, looking at that or in that type of situation or whatever, then, I would be happy to help them.
Okay. So how can people reach you if they have more questions? Do you have a website or?
I do have a website. I buy properties and I also sell them. So my portal website is PK Properties. That's P like Paul, K like Kelly, properties.info. And then when you go to that, you will see that there, if you want to buy a house, you click on this website. You want to sell a house, you click on this one. That's how they can get to me.
And you can also, if you're listening in Savannah, you can also just send me an email. It's
Absolutely, sure.
realestate@juliamspencer.com, and I can put you in touch with Mary here. Now, if you just tuned in, you're listening to Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer. My guest here is Mary Pearson, a fellow investor who has found yet another way to skin the cat of real estate investing. We're talking to her today. And let me just inform you of one other thing. The Savannah Voice Festival is premiering a new opera by Michael Ching entitled Anna Hunter, The Spirit of Savannah, on Thursday, November 2nd through Saturday, November 4th at the Davenport House, 324 East State Street. For more information and tickets, go to savannahvoicefestival.org/festivals-events. And at this point, I want to get to one of the questions. And again, feel free to contact me on social media. You can actually just Google my name, Julia M. Spencer. I'm on all the platforms, on all the going platforms out there on the interwebs. And I had a question actually from a subscriber. His name is Bruce Goldner. And he asked me about, we're kind of going back to tax deeds and tax liens here, but he asked me a question. I'm just going to go ahead and read it. And we're going to discuss it here on the show. And by the way, in the future, hopefully Mary can be a regular guest here. In the future, we're going to figure out how the phones work, and we're going to take your direct calls of questions. Between the two of us, we can probably figure it out, or if not, maybe do some research and get back to you at a later time. But here's the question. Hi, Julia. I'm curious to know your opinion on investing in deeds liens on properties that have been damaged or destroyed from natural disasters, as we unfortunately have had so many lately in Houston, the Florida Keys, and now Napa and Santa Rosa, California. Also, if you invested in a deed lien on a property prior to their destruction, what happens now? Thanks for your time. Now, first off, this is an excellent, excellent question.
I can't wait to hear the answer to this one. I want to know that.
Yeah. Well, and I've actually sent him a very lengthy answer here, but I don't want to just read it, so I'm just gonna kind of paraphrase it, and then I'm gonna, ask you what you think, and you can interrupt me, by the way, anytime. So my first response was, my first response that I always have actually is, I'm going to make a YouTube video about this. I'm going to be standing in front of one of these properties and I'm going to tell you what's happening next here. But I've had this question before, actually. So my answer was, if you invested in a deed or lien prior to their destruction, I guess the biggest thing is the question of insurance. And we've had, and Mary and I actually talked about this, when you purchase a lien at a tax sale foreclosure, and here in the state of Georgia, we actually are in a lien state. They kind of call it a hybrid state because you get a sheriff's deed, and there's all these nuances that I'll get to at some future point in time. But for all intents and purposes, what you need to know is you get you buy a tax lien. You don't buy the actual property when you purchase it. And then you have to wait a certain amount of time in which the original owner can come and redeem the property with a 20% penalty, which then goes to 30% after the year. And you really don't have possession of the property, and you can't do anything to it. And the funny thing is, I actually have to add here a little example, is I've had a property like this that I bought. I had to... actually, there was weeds growing. I mean, it was just overgrown. We had to literally kind of like put the trees aside to actually find the properties and the bushes. But the city decided, okay, we're going to cut this grass because it's unsightly, and the neighbors complained. And of course, they're going to charge you for it. But before that, they're going to put a little note on the door. And we're talking about vacant properties here, and basically saying is, if you don't cut the grass, we're going to charge you $200 to cut the grass. And before I want the city to pay somebody $200 to cut the grass, I'd rather just hire somebody to pay $50 or $60 or whatever the going rate is. It's going to be lower than what the city charges me. So, but I really don't have possession, and I really can't go on the property because I would be trespassing. So what do? I mean, do I just let things go for a year? And Bruce's question here is an excellent question. What happens if in that year we have a natural disaster? There's a hurricane. What do we do? So this is my theory, and this is what Mary and I discussed. And feel free to interject anytime. She's nodding. but basically, my philosophy is the properties that I buy are usually vacant, have been vacant for quite some time. And as such, they've already in pretty bad shape. And they're borderline, okay, you can't salvage them anymore, or you need some heavy money thrown at it to make it decent. And so I buy the lower end of the scale. I don't buy the pretty properties. I buy the really, really ugly ones. So for me, if a natural disaster happens, the most amount of money that I'll be out is whatever I invested, maybe $1,000 or $2,000, maybe $500, $800. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But when I go to a tax sale foreclosure, I go there in mind that I probably might likely lose my money. And the fact is, you don't always lose it, because even if the property is destroyed, you have to remove the building that crashed down on itself. You still have the land.
That was my question, and we did talk about that. And I agree with you. Once you explained your philosophy, as long as the value of the land exceeds what you paid for it, then you still have the land. So, you still have an asset at some point. And typically if the building's destroyed, the previous owner is not going to redeem it anyway. Yes. And so you are going to have a piece of land that's going to be worth something. Mm-hmm. So
you're kind of in the risk there still, in terms of whether or not... I mean, if the building falls down and you just have a pile of rubble there and rubbish, and
then you have to clean it up.
It's going to cost money to. So you kind of have to factor that in. So you have to know all these risks before you go in, and of course, always drive by the property. Any property that you're planning on buying, I've been very guilty of not doing that and buying some really bad things. And there are YouTube videos to prove this, by the way, listeners here in Savannah.
There are. I've seen some.
If you want a funny laugh, go, check those out, because those would be entertaining, if anything. But then there's the other set of investors that I've met, and the first thing they do is they go to the property, they board it up, and they just completely, shut everything down. I've actually bought properties where they have bought plexiglass and just boarded up every single window, door, exit, crevice of the entire building. I mean, the whole building was just plexiglass. And this, by the way, right here in Savannah. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, what are they trying to do? But they're basically just securing it. Nobody goes in. And they will try to add that property to maybe an umbrella policy, which is a policy that they have for their business, their investment business, that encompasses a certain amount of value rather than properties individually.
Yeah, because to get that kind of property insured as a standalone property would be extremely difficult, I would think.
It would be very much. I mean, they will require pictures, because they're obviously not going to... like, for example, I had properties where the porches were just falling down, the railings are missing, the roof is kind of questionable, and they're just like, no, we're not going to insure that, because the next little tiny storm that comes through, you're going to make a claim for $5,000 for the roof, and we're not going to pay it.
Right.
So
now there are companies, because I've bought those type of properties and then rehabbed them, and there are companies who will, if you're going to rehab them, of course, they want to know what you're going to do and this, that, and the other, and they will insure them, but it's only month by month, and it's expensive. So just keep that in mind as well. There are some, there's not that many, but I have worked with some, one up by Kansas City, Missouri, that would actually insure our properties that were pretty dilapidated for the process of time that we were rehabbing them. But like I said, it was pretty costly, and it's just on a month by month basis. And then they want to know what you've done, where you are, they want a projected time of it being done and that type of thing. But, so the insurance thing can get real expensive on those type of properties if they're just sitting there. But, I have another thought though. And I don't know what they do here, but, sometimes, like where I'm from, the fire department occasionally needs to practice on stuff.
Oh yeah.
So once in a while, I haven't done this, but other investors have. Like, for instance, they bought a property and it got damaged to the point where it made more sense to raise the property and then either try and sell the land or build new. Occasionally, our fire department would come and do they would burn it for them.
Wow.
Because they needed the practice with the guys and all their gear and the fire and all that. And so I don't know if that happens here or not, but it's something to think about. If you have a dilapidated property that you need to get rid of, maybe you could get that done for free.
That sounds like I have some homework to do. I definitely will check on that. I don't have any right this moment, but
yeah,
I might here within the year. And I've purchased some properties where some of the buildings probably should be removed.
Yeah.
And if I could get the fire department to do it.
Especially if you have volunteer fire departments, they're looking for projects to do because they have to train their people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So just a thought.
That's awesome.
It was great to be here.
Did you want to add something?
Yes, it was.
I don't want to just dismiss you.
No. Thank you so much for letting me come on. I would love to be a regular on your show. I did do a radio show for several years in Missouri, and I loved it, and I miss it.
That's right.
You're a radio host yes, and I really enjoy it. And I do have some ideas. I'll visit with you later after the show for the show. And for all the listeners out there, I would encourage you to go to Julia's YouTube channel. She has some amazing YouTubes out there. I've purchased some ebooks from her. She's a wealth of knowledge, and it's a great place for you to get your feet wet, get started, and see what's available and see what's out there. There's enough deals for everybody. So I've heard people say, "Why would you want to help someone else?" Well, why not? Sure, I'd be happy to help anyone who wants to maybe get started or have questions and help them out. So
thank you so much for being on the show.
You bet.
So I guess in summary, I guess the thing is, how much risk do you want to take on? Mm-hmm. Can you get insurance? And if you can't do either one, is to find alternative methods. And by the way, this is something for the Savannah listeners here. If you're a real estate investor or plan to become one, It's actually really amazing that the more people that I speak to, other real estate investors that have been in business much longer than I, we talk, and it's not like somebody else's knowledge and mine combined. It translates into more because we together come up with new things all the time. So this is why I'm so enthusiastic about real estate as a whole. By the way, if you're listening in Savannah and you would like to come on my show and you have some knowledge and information about real estate, if you're a realtor or a vacation rental host, maybe you're another tax sale foreclosure investor, or you want to just be a homeowner and want to find out how to buy a house, and maybe you do qualify for a mortgage or maybe not, just feel free to send me a message, realestate@juliamspencer.com. I'll be so happy to hear from you. And we are actually close to the top of the hour. You are listening to Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer. Feel free to tune in again next week. I'm usually on at 12:06 p.m. right after the noon announcement of peace and happiness, which I'm so happy to always hear. You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community with Global Soul.
For your free guide to real estate investing, visit juliamspencer.com.